The American plains in the 19th century were the battleground for some of the most complex and violent confrontations in U.S. history. Here cultures clashed in a brutal dance of survival, sovereignty, and sometimes senseless violence. At the heart of many of these struggles were the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers, a warrior society known for their fearless defense of their lands, their merciless warfare, and a grim legacy that continues to captivate historians today. The Dog Soldiers were not only fierce defenders of Cheyenne territory, but also a living embodiment of cultural and spiritual beliefs, emphasizing both the sacred duty of protection and the relentless violence used against perceived enemies. Their treatment of captives, particularly women, serves as one of the darkest chapters in this era, casting a harsh light on the conflicts of the time and the extreme measures that mark this warrior society. The Cheyenne migration and the emergence of the Dog Soldiers. Originally an agrarian society from the Great Lakes region, the Cheyenne moved westward as European-American expansion pushed them from their ancestral lands. Settling in the plains of modern-day Wyoming, Colorado, and Kansas, the Cheyenne adapted to the prairie environment and became skilled bison hunters. This cultural shift, combined with the adoption of horses introduced by the Spanish in the 17th century, transformed the Cheyenne into a nomadic, warrior-focused society, increasingly dependent on bison hunting and intertribal trade. Among the Cheyenne warrior societies played critical roles in organizing and protecting the community. These societies were more than mere fighting groups. They were social structures embodying spiritual beliefs, values, and sacred duties. Each warrior society had specific roles, responsibilities, and ceremonial duties. Within this system, the Dog Soldiers, Hoda Montano, were the most revered and fearsome, tasked with defending their people at all costs. Their rise coincided with the growing pressures on the plains. Tribes as settlers encroached upon traditional hunting grounds, depleted bison herds, and disrupted the Cheyenne way of life. Myth and reality, the sacred roots of the Dog Soldiers. According to Cheyenne oral tradition, the origins of the Dog Soldiers are intertwined with a spiritual vision experienced by a Cheyenne warrior. In the vision, a wolf, sometimes interpreted as a dog in translation, appeared, imparting wisdom about bravery, loyalty, and protection. Inspired by this vision, the warrior established the Dog Soldiers, embodying a code of fearless devotion and self-sacrifice for their people. This mythological origin underscored the Dog Soldiers' dedication to their roles as protectors, a duty that was considered sacred and non-negotiable. Each Dog Soldier wore a special dog rope or sash, often adorned with feathers, sacred symbols, or colors representing spiritual power. In battle, a Dog Soldier would stake this sash into the ground, a physical and symbolic gesture of their commitment to stand and fight to the death rather than retreat. This act not only demonstrated their courage, but also reinforced their cultural identity. As defenders, these sashes, along with other distinctive regalia, such as feathered headdresses, body paint, and sacred medicine bundles, were not mere adornments, but extensions of the warriors' spiritual identities. These adornments were believed to connect the Dog Soldiers to protective, spiritual forces that guided and strengthened them in battle. The Dog Soldiers and the threat of encroachment. By the mid-1800s, the Cheyenne were embroiled in a conflict for survival, as settlers continued to press westward, encouraged by government policies like the Homestead Act, which offered land in the West. Settlers cut into Cheyenne hunting grounds, drained resources, and disregarded the treaties that promised protection and respect for Cheyenne territory. In response, the Dog Soldiers emerged as defenders of their lands, and people increasingly radicalized, as the Cheyenne faced displacement, starvation, and betrayal at the hands of US officials and soldiers. For the Dog Soldiers, this escalating violence was not just a series of battles. It was a desperate attempt to preserve their way of life. They attacked settlements, ambushed military convoys, and retaliated against any parties infringing on their land. These raids were brutal and intended to send a message. The Cheyenne would not surrender their lands or their freedom without a fight. For the settlers, these raids were terrifying and came with real human costs. Men, women, and children were often killed or captured, intensifying fear and animosity toward the Dog Soldiers. This fierce resistance made them enemies of both the settlers and the U.S. government. who saw them as a direct threat to expansion and security in the plains. Captive women and the dark side of the Dog Soldiers campaign. The Dog Soldiers' capture and treatment of women during these raids has left a dark legacy that continues to shape the way they are remembered. Reports of these acts paint a grim picture of the extremes the Dog Soldiers were willing to go to in order to retaliate against perceived invasions. Captive women faced brutal treatment, sometimes tortured or used as leverage in negotiations or as tools of psychological warfare. This cruelty was intended to instill fear in settlers, discouraging further encroachment into Cheyenne territory. The stories of captivity were particularly horrifying to American settlers and public opinion back east, as accounts of violence against women struck a deep chord. One infamous incident involved the German sisters captured in 1874 near the Smoky Hill River in Kansas. Their family was attacked and the four sisters, Catherine, Sophia, Addie and Julia, were taken as captives. During their captivity, the young women endured physical abuse, starvation and psychological torment. Eventually, through negotiations with Cheyenne chief Stonecall, Catherine and Sophia were released. But their harrowing experience left a lasting impression on the public, further cementing the Dog Soldiers' reputation as brutal warriors in the eyes of the settlers. The Sand Creek Massacre and the Dog Soldiers' pledge of retaliation. The Cheyenne people experienced numerous betrayals at the hands of US forces, but few were as shocking and transformative as the Sand Creek Massacre. On November 29, 1864, a group of over 700 Colorado Territory militiamen, under Colonel John Shivington, launched a surprise attack on a Cheyenne and Arapaho encampment along Sand Creek. Although this encampment flew a white flag of truce, the soldiers showed no mercy, slaughtering approximately 150 people, mostly women, children, and the elderly. Soldiers committed unspeakable acts of mutilation, collecting body parts as trophies, a crime that horrified even some other military leaders. For the Dog Soldiers, Sand Creek represented the ultimate betrayal, shattering any remaining hope that they could coexist peacefully with settlers or trust US government promises. The massacre galvanized the Dog Soldiers, transforming them into avengers driven by grief, anger, and a deep sense of duty to their lost kin. From that point on, the Dog Soldiers swore unyielding vengeance, marking a turning point in their war against US forces. They launched a brutal campaign of raids and ambushes, attacking settler caravans, military forts, and any non-natives found in Cheyenne territory. This warpath continued for years, and the Dog Soldiers gained a fearsome reputation as relentless and vengeful fighters. Tactics and spiritual power on the battlefield. The Dog Soldiers believed that their strength was not only physical but also spiritual. They conducted elaborate rituals before battle, invoking protective spirits, fasting, and performing sacred dances to prepare mentally and spiritually. Each weapon, a bow, arrow, or lance, was crafted and adorned with spiritual symbols. They believed these rituals and symbols gave them supernatural protection and strength. In battle, Dog Soldiers were known for their use of guerrilla tactics, striking with swiftness and unpredictability. They often employed psychological warfare, utilizing their striking appearance and the symbolic act of staking themselves to the battlefield. In one sense, they transformed their own bodies and presence into weapons, projecting an image of invincibility that terrified their opponents. Their knowledge of the plains terrain gave them a tactical edge, allowing them to execute swift attacks and vanish before counterattacks could be mounted. The decline of the Dog Soldiers. By the 1870s, the Dog Soldiers' fierce resistance began to wane as the US military intensified its campaigns to control the Plains tribes' diseases. The depletion of buffalo herds and relentless attacks took a devastating toll on the Cheyenne. Battles like the 1869 Battle of Summit Springs and the continued pressure from the military further weakened the Cheyenne resistance. The Dog Soldiers fought with bravery, but they were vastly outnumbered, and the US government's superior resources and relentless expansion made their struggle untenable. In their final days, the Dog Soldiers faced the grim reality of defeat. Many were killed in battle, while others were forced onto reservations, stripped of their lands, culture, and autonomy. The end of the Dog Soldiers marked the end of an era for the Cheyenne people, a tragic conclusion to decades of fierce resistance. bravery, and a quest for survival. Legacy of the Dog Soldiers, a complex symbol of bravery and tragedy. The legacy of the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers is a testament to the complexity of Native American resistance during the 19th century. They were protectors, avengers, and fierce warriors, dedicated to preserving their people and their way of life. However, their legacy is also intertwined with acts of violence and trauma, particularly towards captive women, which has made their history all the more controversial. While they were celebrated as defenders of Cheyenne sovereignty and champions of their cultural values, the brutality of their raids and the treatment of captives cannot be ignored, and this duality complicates the narrative of their place in history. Despite the decline of the Dog Soldiers as a warrior society, their impact on Cheyenne culture persists. The ideals of bravery, resilience, and loyalty continue to echo within the Cheyenne community. Today, the Northern and Southern Cheyenne tribes maintain military societies that reflect the spirit of the Dog Soldiers, albeit in a transformed form. These modern-day societies honor the memory of the Dog Soldiers, celebrating their history of fierce resistance and dedication to protecting their people. However, the role of women within these modern warrior societies has shifted. No longer are they treated as pawns or victims in the brutal conflicts of the past. Instead, contemporary Cheyenne women are an integral part of their communities, holding leadership roles and participating in ceremonies, preserving the sacred traditions of their ancestors, and contributing to the healing and resilience of their people. The reconciliation of memory, a path toward healing. While the history of the Dog Soldiers and their violent acts is an undeniable part of the Cheyenne legacy, it is important to understand that their actions were shaped by the extreme circumstances they faced. The relentless pressure from westward expansion, the constant threat to their lands and way of life, and the traumas of betrayal by the U.S. government all contributed to their brutal resistance. This does not excuse the violence or suffering they inflicted on others, but it offers a broader context that highlights the complexities of survival in a world marked by colonization and dispossession. In modern times, the Cheyenne and other Native American tribes have worked tirelessly to reclaim their narratives and heal from the trauma caused by centuries of violence and oppression. The history of the Dog Soldiers, while deeply painful, is now part of a larger process of cultural restoration and reconciliation. Many Cheyenne people view their ancestors' resistance not as a glorification of violence, but as a necessary response to the existential threat posed by settlers in the U.S. government. As more stories are shared, and the painful history of Native American peoples is revisited, the Dog Soldiers' legacy is being reignited. This process is not about erasing or forgetting the darker aspects of their history, but rather about acknowledging the complexities of their actions and the contexts that shape them. For the Cheyenne, this means balancing their pride in the bravery and resilience of the Dog Soldiers with the need to address the atrocities committed during times of war and conflict. This reconciliatory approach is a crucial step in moving forward, while honoring the past, the Dog Soldiers. In the context of Native American resistance, it is important to note that the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers were not the only group of native warriors who resisted the encroachment of settlers and the U.S. government with such ferocity. Other Plains tribes such as the Lakota Sioux, Arapaho, and Comanche also formed warrior societies that played similar roles in their respective communities. These societies were rooted in the same cultural principles of bravery, loyalty, and honor that characterized the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. However, the Dog Soldiers stand out for their unique combination of spiritual symbolism, militaristic discipline, and ruthless tactics. In the broader context of Native American resistance, the Dog Soldiers were part of a tradition of warrior societies that viewed war as a sacred duty. These warriors did not see themselves as mere fighters, but as spiritual protectors, defending their people, their culture, and their way of life from external threats. Their willingness to go to great lengths in their defense of their communities was driven not only by the need to protect, but also by the belief that they had a sacred responsibility to their ancestors and to the future generations of their people. However, the Dog Soldiers' path was also marked by the tragic consequences of this uncompromising resistance. while their actions were undoubtedly shaped by their spiritual beliefs and their commitment to protecting their way of life. The collateral damage of war, particularly the suffering of captives, especially women, has left an indelible scar on their legacy. It is through acknowledging this suffering that we can gain a fuller understanding of the human costs of these historical conflicts and the complexities of the Cheyenne's fight for survival. The Cheyenne dog soldiers' legacy is one of fierce warriors, defenders of their people, and participants in one of the darkest periods of Native American history. Their valor and sacrifice are undeniable, as is the fact that they played a critical role in the preservation of Cheyenne identity and sovereignty during one of the most tumultuous times in us. Yet, as we reflect on their actions, it is impossible to ignore the violence they wrought on their enemies, particularly the women they captured during their raids. Understanding the dog soldiers requires a delicate balance of recognizing their bravery and acknowledging the darker aspects of their history. It involves seeing them not only as warriors, but as products of a time marked by violence, trauma, and a struggle for survival against an ever-encroaching enemy. The treatment of captive women, while appalling and tragic, must be viewed within the broader context of a society fighting for its very existence, a society that had lost its traditional way of life and faced the relentless advance of colonization. Ultimately, the dog soldier's story is a testament to the resilience and tenacity of the Cheyenne people who, despite immense hardship and violence, continue to honor their ancestors' memory and legacy. The modern-day Cheyenne, like other native tribes, have worked to heal from the wounds of the past, reclaiming their culture and identity in the face of centuries of oppression. The Cheyenne dog soldiers' history, both tragic and heroic, remains a powerful reminder of the complexities of war, resistance, and the enduring fight for self-determination.